against that, who are working with the Nikes, trying to set the labor standards and to bring voluntary coordination, et cetera, et cetera. So they are doing stuff, but the reputation is there. And so the negative is reinforced in some cases. In this case, the positive is reinforced. So it's easier to be a sustainable business in Costa Rica. And of course, it feeds on itself when more and more sustainable businesses exist. And by the way, I'm not selling Costa Rica, but it is sellable, I have to say. Because there are, I mean, business models. And again, business school. I mean, I don't know if you had the time to probably not go there, but learn about this, which is probably the iconic sustainable hotel in Costa Rica. It was the first like really. It's a hotel that it was built at the same time that the Marriott near to the airport was built. So the Marriott was $200,000 per room. This was $20,000 per room. The Marriott charges about $200 per room per night in average. The rack rate is higher, but you know, the actual rate's about 200. The actual rate for the other one is about 500. 20,000 investment versus 200,000 investment. Occupation for the Marriott is, I think, 70%, which is very good. But the occupation for the other is more than 100%, because you double bill more than, you know, days when, whatever. I don't know the details of hospitality, but some of you do. That's business. But one is built on the regular standard accommodations expected in a 5-star hotel. The other is built on preserving 1,000-hectare private reserve next to the hotel. Some would see that as a cost, but when you look at the numbers, actually it's a super profitable business that happens to include the environmental sustainability of this huge part of the reserve, but also how it was built, because it doesn't have air conditioning, it doesn't have all these amenities, but people pay for that because they pay for something different. And on top of that, the social dimension again. Who used to be poachers in this private reserve are guides. They know the stuff. They know the forest. They know exactly where they caught these precious animals that they used to sell. Now they get more money by showing them to tourists. So this is, again, it's not values do play a part on the entrepreneur who started it. But after the system was set, actually incentives are aligned for everyone. So the poacher actually now protects the forest more than it used to, you know, poach on it, because it's their livelihood. You know, and this is beautiful, because humanly speaking, because this guy now tries to speak English, or I mean, speaks a little bit. Speaks a universal language, it's, you know, badly spoken English, which is the universal language of the world. Or at least those of us who do speak this badly spoken English have to say that. But, so that's what, and when you see that, and you go to Costa Rica and find it, again, builds on the country's reputation as well. So there is a kind of there are virtuous cycles that people can build, but there are, again, to me, they're business decisions, because this was not set up by an NGO. Values do play a great role, because the entrepreneur behind this project clearly had values different from those who were building the Marriott Hotel, which has its own CSR programs and environmental sustainability, recycles, whatever you want, but it was established in a different, with a different mindset. And that leads me to a final point on our roles. And most of us, or it seems to me that most of us are academics. And so we have an education role, and the word education came up several times. I think we need to create knowledge, and we need to diffuse that knowledge in a credible way. Somebody said it perfectly. It has to be translated. It has to be convincing. It has to be sexy, right? I mean, we need all the IPCC reports didn't do what Al Gore's documentary did. And clearly IPCC's reports were more accurate than the documentary. But that's not the point. The point is that people listen, watch, and you know, see one thing, and we need to work closely. And this initiative, by the way, having together in the same room academics, but also practitioners of business practitioners, those social entrepreneurs, even government representatives or former government representatives, are crucial, because we need to connect all the dots, and I think that's important. I don't mean to be pessimist, but I don't see governments taking a leading role. I do think we need to influence governments into doing the right things. For instance, measuring the right things. And let me give you one example that goes to the heart of the definition of sustainability. for all of you business people, both academics or practitioners out there, if I tell you, this is a financial statement coming from a company and says, I sold my plant this year. I sold it for, I don't know, $1 billion, all my fixed assets. And I'm going to consider that revenue. No accountant in the world would accept that. No board would accept that. And anyone would think, well, you're crazy. But in reality, that's exactly what we do at a national level, for instance. All of our countries, including industrialized countries, when we take out natural resources from our soil, either minerals or even timber, those are assets. Those are national assets that are used by humans, but they are national assets. And we sell them, we cash them in, we take our oil out of the soil, we cash them in, we get, I don't know, $1 billion a year, and we consider that revenue. We would never do that in a firm, because that's an asset. We would put it as cash, an asset, never as revenue. It's not value created, it's converted, but not created. Well, that's measuring problems, measurement problems, and I think governments have to play a role. When firms, put in the revenue, what they sold the timber for instance, they have the same problem, because there is a big cost of what that asset that belonged to a community, it could be local, it could be national, it could be global, that has a cost. It's an asset being sold. And I would say I am an environmentalist, but I'm speaking right now as an academic of business. And what I'm saying is we're making faulty decisions because we are not measuring right. That's where government should play a big, big role, and we should push them for. I don't expect them to be leaders necessarily unless we have a very enlightened leader in government. That would be great. Media have a role to play, huge role, and I think we should do an effort, academics in particular, to get closer to media and to be maybe more active. And that also means, it's hard for us to speak for less than 30 minutes or, I don't know. We need to become more media savvy, better communicators perhaps, and that's something we should do. But finishing where I started, businesses are to me at the heart. And so you're not the majority here, but for all of you business leaders in the room, I think, you are literally, to me, the main force of change, for good or for bad. Either you do it or you don't. But I think by defining your business models, you actually decide on how the economies and the societies are going to look like. And we need to, I have a column in a regional magazine, and I entitled it, last one I entitled, Minding Your Own Business. Because it's an expression that has been, there for so long, mind your own business. This is not the time to mind your own business. You need to mind everyone else's business at this point. And it's not only your suppliers, your customers, that's kind of the first step. And big corporations that in the past were maybe regarded not as the most sustainable are now doing a lot. But more is needed. Firms need to change their regulatory, for instance, frameworks, to just give an example. And it is in their best interest because of all these competitive pressures that are so many times argued, right? We do the right thing, but then our competitors don't. So we have a disadvantage. Well, not if you do the right thing for everyone and help change the way the regulation works. And by the way, I'm pro-business, by the way. So I'm not saying big government necessarily. It's effective government. And I think regulations are needed. Quick example, Europe, the European Union. When it changed, there was this movement for what happens to your consumers, what happens to your suppliers, but also what happens to your communities, because the effects go back to you eventually, when again, eventually it's getting more and more shorter term. And I think that is already happening out of pressure. Perhaps the crisis helps, perhaps. I'm part of a group called the Young Global Leaders in the World Economic Forum. And in the meeting in Davos in 2009, we started working on a draft that we already had on what was called the YGL Global Business South. Two professors at HBS at Harvard Business School had written an article in 2008 that some MBA students took last year. And by the time of graduation, I think about 200 of them had actually taken the oath. We expect dozens of business schools this May or June to take this oath. When I presented this to my students at INCAE, the overwhelming, the message was, of course, this is something we want to do, but this is not enough. So I see a new generation of people who are really longer-term thinking, who are really seeing the world as a whole. So signals are there. And perhaps this long-term thinking that I'm talking about is just what our parents and grandparents called wisdom. And that's what we as human race may want to thrive